Welcome to Check In with Jason Lauritsen, where we explore how to create human, connected workplaces that employees love and that fuel organizational success. Each week, I invite someone to join me who is leading the way in this work so that we can be educated and inspired to do better work in our own organizations. Today's guest is John McHugh. John is Vice President of External Affairs for Kwik Trip. Now, this is not the Kwik Trip that spells with a Q. This is the Kwik Trip that spells it Kwik Trip. So we want to make sure we know who we're talking about today. And this Kwik Trip is based in La Crosse, Wisconsin. In his role, John has helped the company achieve recognition as a top workplace, as listed by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, the Des Moines Register, and nationally by USA Today. John, thanks so much for joining me today.
Jason, it's an honor to be with you.
Well, you and I met at the USA Today Top Workplaces National Awards event in Las Vegas this spring. I was there to speak. You were there to, speak, I guess, as part of a panel, but also to pick up some hardware as a national top workplace. Pretty cool event, right?
It was a great event. Actually, one of the best events I've attended in the last 20 years. They know how to celebrate a top workplace.
That they do. It was fun and quite a show. And I am so delighted that you are here because one of the things that really stuck with me from that event was the stories that you shared about the work you're doing as part of that panel. Like those things that really stuck with me. And I'm like, I need to talk to this guy. So I'm so grateful that you're here so that we can do that. But before we do that, I do want to get to know you a little bit better and learn a little bit more about the company. So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about Kwik Trip first.
Sure. We're a convenience store in an industry that's there's a lot of us around, obviously. We're here in the upper Midwest primarily, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, a little bit into the Dakotas, a little bit in Upper Peninsula of Michigan. About 900 stores with 39,000 coworkers. We don't call our people employees, we call them coworkers. That's an intentional piece on our part. We're very successful as an organization. We're privately held. The family that owns us is phenomenal. There's strong servant leaders, and that really permeates our entire culture. So strong company, a good presence, but primarily here in the upper Midwest.
Well, this is an extra fun conversation for me because I'm an upper Midwest guy, grew up in the upper Midwest. I knew your organization, your company well. In fact, you have a location in my hometown where I grew up. So it's kind of fun to get to unpack this a little bit. So John, tell me a little bit about your role and what you do as well, just to kind of ground us in that.
Sure. I've been here 21 years at Kwik Trip, and believe it or not, at 21 years, I would be one of the newbies in the senior management team. We have a lot of longevity. We have very little turnover here in our corporate areas. Just a testament to the great culture here. I have several different roles, and that's evolved over time. When I first started, I was brought in as a trainer to help really develop our culture. At one point in time, then I took over the training department. And then when I started back in 2004, we were so small, we didn't even have a public relations division. We were that small. And then eventually our owner came to me and said, well, would you help start a PR division as well? So I did that several years ago. I now oversee a lot of different areas, including the family office because we're family owned. But my primary role is really to help oversee our culture, to make sure that we have a good culture, that we maintain that culture, and that as we grow, because we grow by about 40 new stores a year, which is a lot in our industry, to make sure that as we continue that growth pattern, that strong culture that we've always had continues to be even stronger. That's my primary role.
So tell me how you found your way into kind of doing this. Obviously, 21 years you've been evolving and your role has been changing, but how initially did you find your way into this work of kind of culture building and training?
Yeah, I wasn't at all involved in the industry. I was a teacher, educator, high school level, and principal for many years. Well, in 2003, our owner, Don Zietlow, had been at an industry conference, and he heard a woman speak by the name of Ann Rhodes. At that time, she was in charge of all the people division at Southwest Airlines. You remember back at that time period, Southwest Airlines was really known as the place for a great culture, especially in the airline industry. And our owner was so impressed by what she said, he came back, he said, I want to create for the convenience store industry what Kwik Trip could do, what Southwest Airlines did for the airline industry, to be the name in our industry known for great guest service, customer service, great product, great availability of everything we offer. So he wanted to start that process and reached out to me. He had known of me in the area and said, hey, would you be inclined to come and work with us at Kwik Trip? And Jason, to be honest with you, I said, Don, I don't want to go pump gas. And he said, no. He said, I think it's more than that. He said, we have a culture, but we don't do much leadership development. We don't do a lot in our mission statement, which is important to us. Could you help us come develop that? And so I said, well, Don, I'll give you 1 year. And then I decided whether or not I was going to go back to my previous occupation. Well, I was here all of 3 months and said, I'm not leaving, because the higher up you went in the company, the nicer the people got. There was none of the politics that I expected in corporate America. The culture was phenomenal. People cared about each other. And so I was here 3 months and said, I'm never leaving. They're going to have to carry me out.
Yeah, that's probably a good call, because I think that's a pretty lucky land, because that is not an experience that is a common one, unfortunately, for people. Exactly. But good for you, and good for all the other 39,000 folks that have found their way into that work. So that's awesome. And it's so interesting. I love having these conversations, because it seems so many people that find their way into this work, right? The work of culture or creating workplace experience, that really care and are passionate about it. Mm-hmm. We all kind of found our way here accidentally, or we were kind of called to it in some way. It's just really interesting to me that's how it works. Mm-hmm. So now, today, you have a pretty awesome job, a pretty cool job. What is it, if you could pin down one thing, what is it that you love most about the work you get to do today?
Jason, what I love most is the fact that there's a purpose in what I do. My job is more than just a paycheck. And I think at the end of the day, that's what most of us want. We want to know that something we did today made a difference. And why I think culture in a workplace is so important, because at the end of the day, it doesn't simply impact just the workplace culture. If it's a good place to work and there's compassion here, there's purpose here, that means all of our employees go home and their home life is also better. They're better parents. They're better spouses. They're better friends, because they're not carrying home the tensions and the anxieties and the frustrations of a workplace. Now, granted, there's always a little bit of that. I get that. But if we have a great culture here, that really informs and inspires and translates into everything else in our lives. So if we can create a good work experience environment for our people here, that really matters for the big picture perspective. And that's what I enjoy doing, is the fact that at the end of the day, I hope our people on Sunday night, they'll get that pit in their stomach that we sometimes talk about while going to work. That's what brings me enjoyment.
That's so important too. What better impact can we have on the world than sending people back to their families as better people, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So let's transition into, I can't wait to dig into your work a little bit, because, back to the way that we connected, I'm sitting in the audience, I'm listening to you talk about your work. And obviously I knew of the brand, I knew of the organization. I've purchased from you in the past, but I didn't know anything about the broader story. And so as you started unpacking and talking about sort of how you have gone about constructing or leading and building a workplace like this, the fact that you said that you put storytelling at the center of it, that story was kind of how you are driving this culture and creating this workplace that's winning awards at a national and a local level. I've heard this before. People talk about it, but oftentimes when you start trying to pin people down about, okay, what does that actually mean? Like, you're saying you use storytelling or story, but what does that actually mean? There's some real meat underneath it for you. And so we're going to talk about that today and sort of pull it apart and show people what that looks like. But I'm curious, I want to start first by, how did that begin? Where did you stumble into the awesome power of story to fuel your culture? What's the origin of this whole thing?
Yeah, I think any great culture, workplace culture, has a storyteller. As a matter of fact, if you talk to any one of the 39,000 coworkers here at Kwik Trip and you say, "Hey, I heard John McHugh," the first thing they'll say is, "Well, I bet he told a story, didn't he?" And then, "Did you bring your Kleenex? Because sometimes you cry." And that's intentional because I think we can form people in a lot of different ways. And it all happens through our brain. And, there's a part of your brain called the cerebral cortex, part of your brain. And that's the part of your brain that remembers things like physics and theory and HR policy. The problem is it doesn't remember that information for very long. Well, there's another part of your brain close to where your stem comes in, your limbic brain, and that's the part of your brain that remembers stories and stories with an emotional content. And if I can touch your limbic brain, you'll remember that lesson, that information for at least 12 times longer than anything in your cerebral cortex. So I'm a firm believer that if we really want to form culture and develop policies that really matter, you want to influence people through that storytelling. Let me give you one example if I can. Many years ago, we implemented a policy that when you shopped at our stores, the last thing that we're supposed to say to you as you leave is "stop back again. See you next time," called the return comment. A lot of retail establishments do that. Well, we implemented that policy, and we even sent around secret shoppers to judge whether or not our coworkers were doing that. And it just didn't catch on. Well, we gathered for year-end meetings with all of our coworkers, and I said, "Well, can I tell a story about this?" Now, what had happened earlier that year, we had an elderly gentleman show up at the store, and he had just been with his family for Christmas, and he was one of those guys that kind of goes off on religion and politics and different things, and he had gone off on one of his tangents with his family. And when they were leaving, his daughter came up to him and said, "Dad, when you come here for Christmas and you go off on your tangents, it's not fun to have you with us." So he left on Christmas when he wasn't always welcome. Stopped right after that into one of our stores. He bought a banana and a pint of milk. And the young lady said, "We'll see you next time. Stop back again." He was so moved, he wrote a letter to the corporate office. And so I called him. I said, "Why did you decide to write?" He said, "It's good to know that there's some places where you can go for Christmas where you're always welcome." And he started crying. I shared that story then with all the coworkers. And do you know what happened to the number of coworkers then who said, "See you next time, stop back again"? Because although we have 11 million customers a week, we have no idea what's happening in their personal lives before they shop with us. But if I can help our coworkers understand through their limbic brain that what they say or what they do matters, they'll stick with that lesson. It works for us when we tell the story.
Mm, mm. Well, I think that's a nice, I guess, tie-in. What you just did and what you just shared is kind of at the heart of your, I think the process as I understood it, as you described it, which is so much of this, so much of the story component of culture for you is powered by unsolicited customer testimonials or customer notes or
Yeah.
whatever in. And I think there, if I remember correctly, it was kind of early days when you had this, that those started coming and there was sort of this moment or this light bulb that kind of went off. That's like, okay, this is the thing. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
You bet. Yeah, it was in 2004, again, a couple months after Don had heard Ann Rhodes speak. And we started talking about how can we really develop this great culture of customer service. And that year in 2004, we received unsolicited 21 guest compliment letters. 21 people wrote into the corporate office at Kwik Trip, said I had a great experience. So Don and I and our head of retail said, "Well, what do we do with the letters after our CEO reads them?" And it goes in a file someplace. And we said, "Well, let's do this. We send a newsletter to all the stores every Wednesday. How about every time we get one of those letters, we'll publish that letter in the newsletter. It's for everybody to read. And if we know who the coworker is, we'll reward them with a gift card and just celebrate those great successes, unsolicited." Well, what we found is what many other people have found is that goodness celebrated through story creates more goodness. So what happened is that just started to multiply. So this last year we received, get this, unsolicited, 2,660 unsolicited guest compliment letters. And what had happened, what we realized is, Jason, there's only 10 variations on the theme. Like either I stopped at your store, I forgot my wallet, the coworker saved me from embarrassment, paid for my lunch. or I didn't know how to put air in my tire. Your coworker helped. It's just 10 variations on that. But what we discovered is that when our coworkers read those stories and then they got put in a similar situation, what they did is they repeat the story that they had heard by action. Goodness celebrated, create more goodness. Now, when we first started doing this, those great letters, they were like in page 3 or 4 of the newsletter. They became so popular, and we decided, well, we need to emphasize what's most important, because in the old days, the front page was all the numbers, sales numbers. And finally, we said, well, the numbers are great, but that's not what drives our success. It's our customer service experience. So now when you get the newsletter on Wednesday, the first page, actually it's now the first 3 pages, are all those unsolicited guest compliment letters. That's the first thing that everybody reads when they get the newsletter. So it's one of the ways we celebrate the story.
That's an awesome, what an interesting thing. And I know that I when we talked previously, I pushed you on a little bit, like, how do you go about increasing that, that 21 to 2660 in 20 years? I don't know what the percentages is, but that's a very, very big percentage increase over the course of 20 years. And you assured me that that is entirely through what you just described. It's just goodness creating more goodness, people understanding and repeating it, creating an environment that supports that. But I also know that there are some other things or some other ways that you have learned from these and that you have kind of operationalized into how you do business, supporting the environment, right? That supports people and creating that experience, that sort of helps them understand what that looks like. So I am curious, what does that look like? How have you taken, as this started to grow and you started to really lean into this and you learned from the kinds of things that you were hearing and whatever, how did you turn that into kind of some of the traditional stuff we would think about how you're, setting expectations or how you're training or supporting people in your different stores? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question, Jason, because at some point in time, you really have to kind of formalize the process to make sure that it can be repeated, especially in our case, when we go into new markets, new areas. Now, a couple of things. Those unsolicited guest compliment letters, that niche, that piece by which we kind of evaluate our culture, that was intentional. You go to a lot of places, fast food service restaurants, QSRs, and you'll get your receipt at the bottom. We'll say, hey, if you fill out the survey, we'll give you a free cheeseburger next time. Well, you're kind of reinforcing some feedback. If it's an unsolicited guest compliment letter, there's a certain legitimacy to that, because it's going to take you some effort to actually unsolicited and say, I'm going to write in, this is my experience. Now, what we've done is we've taken the best of those experiences and we've codified them. So we have a list of expectations called guest service expectations. And there are about 21 of them. And they're pretty simple, but they're simple things like we don't ever want you to talk at the register with one of your coworkers when there's a guest in line. Because one of the things we heard from those stories is when I show up at a Kwik Trip, I feel like they're paying me attention. Don't eat personally behind the register. Again, focus on the guest. Even things like dress code, make sure that your shirt is tucked in, that you're wearing the uniform, that you have your name extension. Those are all things that we've learned through those different stories, that feedback, unsolicited feedback from our guests that they really like. So we codify those. And so that every time a store meets for their meetings, every single time, we read through all 21. 1, 2, 3, just to kind of reinforce that. The other piece we do is we do meetings in a box, is what I call them. So several times a year, the leaders gather at our support center, which is our term for the corporate office, and we'll do a 45-minute meeting on what's important for the next 6 months. It's myself, the CEO, and a few others. Then we'll film that, obviously, and that gets sent out to all the districts and all the stores to watch. And then we also send out the accompanying handouts if there's any information that they need in a paper format, so that all 39,000 coworkers receive the same message about what we want to emphasize these next 6 months. Every single meeting, every single time we do it, the first thing that happens in that meeting is I stand up and I tell a 7-minute story to reinforce what we're all about here. Every single time. We never have a meeting without a story that starts the meeting. That's how we codify that.
Now, I know one of the things that I find this so interesting, how the stories have given rise to well, there was sort of a commitment to culture that produced these stories that then have reinforced the culture that then produces more stories. It's kind of this flywheel that you have created. And at the center of it is all of your coworkers. And obviously the experience of that is creating a work experience for them that is engaging and satisfying to the point that when they're asked to complete a survey, obviously they're scoring high enough that you're getting these awards for culture, which is not but as someone who spent years measuring best places to work, it's hard in your business. So the fact that you're doing it in your business is that much more exceptional. I'm like the things that is top of mind for me is like, why is that flywheel so engaging for employees? Like, what else? Is there a way that you sort of also treat them kind of in a similar way? Like, what is it that you do internally facing your employees that helps them have that experience that then they can spill over or share with your guests?
Yeah. And Jason, let me actually even back up a step further is how do you find the people that fit that kind of culture? Because the reality is that there's some people in our world that aren't going to be moved by a story or about great guest service. Like, I'm only in it for the paycheck and I could care less. So we actually start even earlier in the process before they're part of our culture. When we interview for a fit with this culture. So our first three questions in the interview process, doesn't matter if you're the person selling the donut at the store, the person back in La Crosse making the donut in our facility, bakery facility, or the person delivering the donut on the truck. Here's the first three questions we ask. Number one, tell me about the last random act of kindness you did for someone. Number two, how in the last 6 weeks have you made a difference in someone's life? And number three, how have you treated others as you would like to be treated this last month? And that last one's contingent upon our mission statement. Our mission statement is pretty simple. It's to treat others as you'd like to be treated, make a difference in someone's life. So those three questions are trying to figure out whether or not this person is already hardwired to fit this culture of compassion. Because if they don't fit that naturally, Jason, there's not a thing I can do in a training program that's going to fix that. So we start by that process, first of all, is making sure that they instinctively want to work in this kind of environment and also fit. Then once they're in, as I mentioned earlier, we're family owned. And the family that owns us, they're incredible. Real servant leaders. You'd never guess that they're the owners of a multi-billion-dollar company. But one of the things that they do for us, it's rather unique, is that they take almost no money out of the company. The profits come back to all the coworkers, all of us. Doesn't matter if you're full-time or part-time. So this last year, all of us got a 12% cash bonus. So whatever you made in your salary that year, multiply that by 12%. That's what you got as a check at Christmas time. All of us got 5% in our 401k. Even if you didn't put a dime into it, it's better than a match. So the family is so incredibly generous to us. It also creates this environment that you run the store like you own it. Because if I treat that customer well and they come back and next time, and maybe even instead of buying just 1 gallon of milk, now they buy a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread, well, that means my profit sharing at the end of the year is going to be larger. So the family is so generous with us that it creates this climate that you want to take care of every guest because every guest is your guest as a coworker.
So this raises another question for me. I love that. That makes great sense. If you're finding and identifying people that resonate with the culture, you put them in a culture that's resonant to them. It just like that is the dream, right? For most people, it's just that is not an experience that people get to have very often. As someone who, I spend most of my time thinking about and working with leadership and management. And so that's the lens I'm always kind of thinking about. And so as I was thinking about your organization and the work you do, I was curious how. My guess is that you're pretty intentional about how you identify and elevate people as people managers, and then how you support them and train them. And so could you share a little bit about what that looks like and how you approach that to make sure you're putting the right people in charge of caring for your people.
Yeah, exactly. We study a lot of different surveys and ways to measure culture. Obviously, the Top Workplaces program, the Energage survey we use extensively. We also study the Q12, the 12 questions from Gallup that make a top workplace. And out of the 12 questions, we put most credence into this statement. You'll say it's a great place to work if my supervisor or someone at work cares about me as a person. That's actually a bigger driver of your happiness than even paying benefits are, because again, it says something coming from Kwik Trip, but that profit sharing check is phenomenal. But the other 363 days out of the year, your immediate supervisor is a creep. Guess what? It's not a great place to work. So we have a very extensive multi-week training program for all of our new leaders coming in at any level. And we spend a lot of time on compassion and empathy at work. And what does that look like? And we go through the practical pieces of it. So that, for example, I have a list on my bulletin board of all my coworkers and what their favorite treat is. Whether that's Dave and he loves a cream-filled Long John, whether that's Steve and his favorite thing is an apple. So that when they do good things, not only do I thank them for that, but sometimes it's just a little treat as well. And what we do with all of our coworkers is remind them there's some words so powerful, you cannot say them enough. I've never interviewed someone who said, I want to come work for Kwik Trip. Is that right now, every Friday, my boss comes to me and thanks me for what I do, compliments me. And I'm getting sick and tired of hearing it every week. I want to go someplace where I don't. We chuckle because the opposite is true. People say, I've worked at this place for 15 years, never so much as heard a word of gratitude. I want to go someplace where I feel appreciated. So when we do that empathy, compassion training with our leaders, one of the things we emphasize is make sure you express gratitude. That simple thank you phrase, it carries so much weight. So we do a lot with our leaders in training and ongoing training to make sure that they're leading with the heart. At the end of the day, we think that's what matters.
Do you find that, it sounds like your culture is built on longevity and people are there a long time. So do your leaders kind of emerge as through kind of their experience in stores, they kind of become natural leaders and you sort of see them demonstrating and then that's how they get their opportunity?
You bet. Yeah, we have a lot of growth opportunities here at Kwik Trip. And we actually list that very specifically. So if a coworker comes in, it's an entry-level coworker, they know what the path is to become a leader. Here's the next position. Here's the next step. Here are the things we expect of you if you want to get promoted. That's pretty strong here. Now, that doesn't mean it's all the leaders come from it. We have a percentage that also come from outside as well. We try to balance that, not just internal growth, but also external. Because we think that ultimately that's healthy to have a little bit of both, not just one way or the other. Now, how that translates into a good culture, Jason, with our good leaders, turnover. You've heard the adage many times, people don't leave a company, they leave a manager, they leave their boss. In our industry, the turnover rate in the convenience store industry is about 125% annual turnover rate. Our turnover rate is only in the 20%. Here at the support center, we have a 125-acre campus with about 3,000 coworkers with all of our production facilities, offices, and so on. Our turnover rate on this campus is 1%. Once you come, you don't leave. Well, what happens is what we realize, and we all know this in business, if you have a lot of turnover, that just increases expense. Your guest service, your customer service experience isn't as great because those people are, in and out the door so that your customers don't even recognize a common face. So in our industry, to have a 29% turnover rate when it's at its highest for us, that's very successful in our industry. Now, let me say that a lot of that turnover is natural, healthy turnover. We have a lot of students that work for us. They'll start working in their high school years. But unlike a lot of industry people where they'll work for high school for 2 years and then leave, we get them for 2 years and then sometimes 4 years of college as well, because they'll go to a neighboring town for a college and there's a Kwik Trip there as well. So, they graduate after college and their degree may be in pre-med or law or something. Well, those opportunities don't exist so much here at Kwik Trip. So then they move on. But we're fine with that kind of turnover. We've had them for a great 6 years. The other thing is we think that we've had an ethical obligation to form them in what a great culture is, so that whenever they go into that other occupation, that they can recognize, no, here's what you need to do. If they get promoted to be head of their law firm, they know that they need to treat their people with compassion, with respect. how to convey great stories, so that we also take that role seriously, that we're also forming the next generation of leaders, whether or not they're in Kwik Trip or outside of Kwik Trip.
We need you to start turning over more people, John. Like that's what we need you to be sending more. It sounds like you keep most of them. And so we need more of those people going out carrying the word, I think. I could ask you a whole another probably podcast worth of questions about just about kind of what it looks like internally around how you treat each other, how you interact, how you communicate, how you handle conflict, all of those things. Because when you have that many people and that low of turnover and that long of tenure, that suggests that there's a level of commitment and a level of relationship skill implied there. People that have long, healthy marriages, like you work at it and there's skills that are developed. And so the fact that you're keeping people that long and that they don't leave says an awful lot about the mutual commitment that exists between the organization and its people. And so that's truly exceptional, especially in an industry where 125% turnover is the norm.
Yeah. Jason, here's a good example of that. And again, it starts right out of the chute. For those of us who are parents, you want your son or daughter, their first job, to be in a good working experience, good environment. Well, a lot of times when they come to us, they're a great employee because of what mom and dad has already done for them. Well, several years ago, we got a letter from one of our customers and said, hey, I want to compliment you on hiring compassionate people. My son constantly steals from you. He actually comes into the store and he takes stuff, kind of thing. And despite that, your staff has treated my son with a great deal of compassion. It was a Saturday in February. It was snowing outside. My son was sitting out on the curb in front of the store, cleaning the snow out of his shoes because he didn't have socks on. We just don't have money right now for new ones. Well, one of your staff members, Matt, came up to my son, asked if he was okay, and then right then and there took his shoes off and gave my son the socks off his feet. She said, boy, it gives a whole new meaning to giving the shirt off your back. So she said, thank you for hiring compassionate people. Well, when we received the letter, I reached out to Jessica, the store leader, and I said, hey, did you know this is what happened with one of your coworkers? And she wrote back, she said, well, I was working when this happened. Matt came back to my office and he cried because he felt so badly for that kid. He said, I'm very proud of our coworker. He's been with us a year this May. He's 18 years old and still in high school. Well, I've been telling that story many, many times over the years at keynotes. Well, I had a keynote close to the region where this young boy's parents were from. So I invited mom and dad and grandma and grandpa to the keynote. And I told this story. I said, hey, thank you for teaching your son that that's how you treat people, because obviously you trained it in him. We couldn't have done that. Well, the mom and dad, grandma and grandpa got a standing ovation for that. But when we take good people and we take them from good experiences and we celebrate that, what do you think mom and dad felt about Kwik Trip in terms of loyalty after that? And so I think the more that we can do this in all of our corporate cultures, because it's not unique to Kwik Trip. I mean, all of us have great employees. They all do great things. Let's celebrate that. Let's acknowledge that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fantastic. Fantastic. Great work. Thank you for the work you do, and thanks for sharing that. So, like I said, I could ask you questions for days about the culture, but we gotta keep moving, John. Okay. I don't want to keep you here all day. I know you got stuff to do. So let's transition. I would like to ask you about one of the questions I always ask guests is about a challenge that they're facing. So what's a challenge or an obstacle that you are facing or wrestling with right now at work?
Yeah, what keeps me up at night? Again, we're 39,000 coworkers now, 900 stores, grow by 40 stores a year. The challenge is always what happens when your culture gets so large that it doesn't feel like that family feel anymore. We use that as a cliche, but there's some truth to that. How do you continue to maintain that kind of culture the larger we grow? Interestingly enough, our CEO doesn't have that concern. He thinks that it's just the opposite, is that the larger we get, it's kind of like a snowball. Once it starts rolling down the hill, it's so large that it takes care of itself. And there's some truth to that, because what we found is that when we do hire somebody that doesn't fit the culture, because the culture is so strong, that person gets weeded out pretty quickly. Other coworkers say to the store leader, hey, they don't fit. They're not treating our guests with compassion. I get that, but I still worry about it. And here's where 5 years from now, this is where I hope we're at. I hope that at least in our markets, we're a sign and a place that's known for compassion, that's known for civility, that's known for respect. Because I think that's a challenge in our today's world with so many different reasons. But if we, in a retail establishment, can be a source for good, in a place where, no, I know this is where they're always going to be compassionate, where they're going to take care of me, where they call me by name. My hope is that 5 years from now, we're even a more profound source of good for our world. That it's not just about selling stuff for us. It's not just about providing services, but it's also about being that kind of core place where goodness is found. That's my hope for 5 years from now.
Mm. Well, and you are certainly on that path. I think that's a beautiful, just a beautiful goal and objective in terms of giving people a place that feels safe or where they can experience compassion in a world that I think sometimes, especially right now, can feel pretty dispassionate about the individual. And so that's a really beautiful thing. So John, I have to ask you to zoom out broader, because I know inside of Kwik Trip, you have, you're creating something I think really unusual and unique and beautiful there for your coworkers and your customers. When you zoom out, and I know you speak at events and obviously you interact with people all the time, when you think about work more broadly, sort of work for everybody, right? What work means in the world. What do you hope 5 years or more down the road? What do you hope will be different for people about work than it is today?
Yeah, I'm a big Jim Collins fan. Built to Last, Good to Great, and I frequently quoted him. And he's got that wonderful line that at the end of the day, we hope that what we did today, it really matters. And I think that sense of purpose in our work, I think not all of us have that. Can all of us have it? Yeah, I don't think there's a job on the planet that doesn't have purpose, that what we do really matters. And I think there's a lot of miscontentment in the workplace environment because sometimes we've forgotten that what we do really matters. And I don't care if it's selling life insurance. I just spoke to a group of life insurance professionals last week. I'm like, I've been privileged to be with families who had life insurance when they really needed it. And boy, do you know that what you do really matters? And you just watch the tears come down. I spoke with a group of civil engineers, a couple of weeks ago, and do you know, here in Wisconsin, we're blessed with the fact that we have an excellent road system, that I don't have to worry about going down the road and a bridge collapsing. Hopefully not, kind of thing, because of the excellent work that all of you do. And I talk to police officers. Thank you for keeping us safe. And every single time, Jason, I talk about that sense of purpose and what you do, there's not a dry eye in the house. And to me, I hope that 5 years from now, all of us just have a deeper sense that what we do matters. You're making our world a better place, almost all of us. But I don't think we talk about that enough, and I don't think we celebrate it enough. And when you do, boy, do people find job satisfaction.
They sure do. They sure do. Well, and that sense of purpose is so powerful. That's a beautiful, beautiful call out. So thank you for that, John. All right. So there we are. We're arriving at the end. We got to land this plane. The question I like to ask to check us out at the end is, what is one word that best describes how you are feeling as we wrap up this conversation?
Probably no surprise. Excited. I love talking about this.
For me, it's inspired and hopeful. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna say two words because the fact that you are doing what you are doing in your industry, and then you are willing to share and talk and evangelize it, gives me great hope that that more people will follow that lead. So thank you for that.
You bet.
Appreciate you. Well, this has been awesome, John. I'm kid in the candy store when I get to talk to people that are doing such exceptional things. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. If people want to connect with you, what would be the best way to find you?
LinkedIn's pretty easy. It's just John McHugh, JOHNMCHUGH on LinkedIn. Easiest way.
Yep. And if you happen to find yourself in one of the great states in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, make your way into a Kwik Trip or a Kwik Star. If you see either of those, make your way in, check this out, experience it for yourself. So, John, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for listening. Right? I hope you are inspired. I hope that you we'll go back and explore the power of story and what that means in your business and how you can use that to power a culture that engages your people and invites them to greatness and takes care of your customers. So take this inspiration and put it to use. And perhaps most importantly, please remember to check in with those who matter most to you. Might be the most important thing that you can do today. We'll see you next time.